The mirror cracked the night Hugo realized he had been living as a reflection instead of a man. It happened quietly, without drama, in the bathroom of a rented apartment where the light flickered like it was unsure whether to stay. He stared at his own face and felt nothing. No pride, no anger, no desire to change. Just a numb familiarity, as if the person staring back had been rehearsed too many times. Somewhere in the next room, Jin laughed softly at a message on her phone, and that sound, warm and alive, made the silence inside Hugo unbearable. Hugo and Jin met in a city that never asked questions. They were both running, though neither admitted it at first. Hugo had left behind a career that looked impressive on paper, but hollowed him out in private. Jin had escaped a past that kept trying to rename her, reshape her, decide who she should be. They found each other in a photography studio where mirrors lined the walls, used for framing light and correcting posture. Hugo was there to fix a broken camera. Jin was there to shoot portraits of strangers who wanted to be seen. Their first conversation was awkward and honest in a way neither expected. Hugo spoke little, choosing words carefully, as if afraid they might betray him. Jin spoke freely, but her eyes were cautious, always measuring distance. When she asked him to step in front of the camera to test the lens, Hugo hesitated. He had spent years avoiding being truly seen. But something in Jin's calm patience made refusal feel like another lie. So he stood there, unsure, while she adjusted the focus. When the shutter clicked, Jin frowned. Not at the image, but at Hugo. She said the camera was fine. The problem, she said gently, was that he was hiding. The words stung because they were true. Hugo laughed it off, paid for the repair, and left, convinced he would never see her again. But cities have their own plans. They ran into each other days later at a small cafe where mirrors hung behind the counter, doubling the room and making it feel fuller than it was. Jin recognized him instantly. Hugo pretended not to care, then stayed longer than intended. Coffee turned into conversation. Conversation turned into a habit. Soon they were spending evenings together, sharing stories that began lightly and slowly grew heavier. Jin spoke of how she once believed love meant disappearing into someone else's expectations. How she learned, painfully, that survival sometimes requires leaving without closure. Hugo listened more than he spoke, but when he did, his words were raw. He talked about success that demanded silence, about applause that felt like noise, about the exhaustion of pretending to be grateful for a life that never fit. Their connection deepened, not through grand gestures, but through small truths exchanged in quiet rooms. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's fears. Jin noticed how Hugo avoided mirrors, how he would angle himself away from reflective surfaces without realizing it. Hugo noticed how Jin stiffened when conversations turned to the future, how she changed the subject whenever permanence was mentioned. The first real challenge came disguised as opportunity. Jin was offered a major exhibition, the kind that could define a career. The theme was identity, and she wanted Hugo to be part of it. Not as a technician, not as support, but as a subject. She wanted to photograph him as he was, without armor. Hugo refused. The thought of his image displayed, interpreted, judged, felt like standing naked in public. He accused Jin of not understanding his boundaries. Jin accused him of hiding behind fear. Words sharpened. Silence followed. For the first time since they met, the mirrors between them reflected distance instead of connection. They spent days apart, each wrestling with old ghosts. Hugo confronted the truth he had avoided, that his fear of being seen was rooted in years of becoming what others wanted. That refusal had become easier than honesty. Jin, meanwhile, faced her own terror, that asking someone to stay, to be fully present, might lead to abandonment again. That pushing Hugo was a risk she wasn't sure she could survive. When they finally spoke, it wasn't in a dramatic reunion, but in a simple message asking to meet. They chose the studio, the place where it all began. The mirrors were still there, silent witnesses. Jin apologized first, not for wanting him in the exhibition, but for not listening when he said he was afraid. Hugo apologized too, for mistaking vulnerability for weakness. He agreed to the photographs, on one condition, that they would not be perfect, that they would show uncertainty, doubt, and change. Jin smiled, relieved and proud. When the camera clicked this time, Hugo did not look away. He breathed, stood still, and let himself exist without apology. The exhibition was a success, but success was not the resolution they needed. The real challenge came after, when life demanded decisions. Jin was offered a chance to travel, to expand her work internationally. Hugo was offered a role back in the industry he had left, but on his own terms. Both opportunities meant movement, risk, and the possibility of separation. They argued again, not because they didn't care, but because they did. Jin feared losing momentum if she stayed. Hugo feared losing himself if he followed. For nights they lay awake, backs turned, mirrors reflecting questions neither wanted to ask out loud. The resolution came quietly, as most real ones do. They realized love was not about choosing one dream over another, but about refusing to become invisible to each other. They decided to try, not with promises of forever, but with honesty and effort. Jin would travel, but return. Hugo would build something new, not for approval, but for meaning. They would meet in the spaces between, adapting as they went. On the morning Jin left for her first trip, they stood in the hallway, surrounded by mirrors that once felt threatening. Hugo looked at his reflection and saw someone still unsure, still learning, but present. Jin looked at him and saw not a person she needed to save or escape from, but someone walking beside her. Behind closed mirrors, they had learned the hardest truth. That facing yourself is terrifying, but doing it with someone who sees you clearly makes it possible. Their story was not perfect, not complete, but it was real. And sometimes that is the most inspiring ending of all.